How often do you have thoughts like, I wish I could draw like that, or I wish my art looked more like this? Today, we'll go through my step-by-step guideline for analyzing masterworks. It's natural to want to emulate the work of the artists we admire. This guideline will help you figure out exactly what to practice to get the results you want.
To demonstrate the process, we will examine the pen and ink art of Master Alfredo Alcala. The easiest way to do a master study is to pick artists whose work inspires you, meaning that you someday aspire to make art that feels similar to what they're doing. The reason I say this is the easiest is because the primary objective of doing a master study is to develop observation skills. Alcala says, learning to draw is nothing more than the ability to translate what you have seen to paper. Essentially, the key to being able to draw anything, anytime, is through observation. An artist you admire means you're familiar with their work. Knowing what stands out about their style, technique, or methods helps you be more intentional with your practice. Another way of doing master studies is to select artists whose work you're not familiar with. This is more challenging because it's less obvious how to make the study relevant to your needs. For an overview of the entire master study framework, watch this video. Today, we'll focus mostly on the analysis portion of the framework and what to do with it. I chose Alfredo Alcala because he was suggested, and I didn't know much about him. My first step is to search online and at the public library for the best quality images. A great resource for comic book art is Heritage Auction. This Kindle book is good value. The images are decent quality for studies, and it includes commentary from Alcala himself. The second step is to review which images will work for the study. Look for pieces that best showcase the breadth of the master's genius. Even better if you can also match these to your learning goals. This is where my analysis process comes in handy to guide your selection. There are 3 categories that I find most help guide observations about how the masters have made their decisions. The categories in order of priority are lighting and shading, composition, rendering techniques. The first and most important is to establish the source of light. You find the source of light by identifying the highlights and the darks on the picture plane. Basically, look for the high contrast areas. And it would be the same process if you were drawing from a live object. The light informs everything else. Is there more than one source of light? Sometimes there's an apparent backlight or a significant reflection. To confirm whether there is a second source of light, look for the cast shadows. If they're mostly in a logical place, then there's only one intended source of light. I say intended source of light because Master Alcala stretches the rules a little bit. In this image, the cast shadows are under the shield. Logically, the light would approximately shine from the opposite direction. If the light is coming from the top right-hand corner, the creature's weapon would cast a shadow in this area, resulting in more gradual midtones over here. Also, the creature is practically on top of the hero, yet our hero remains in the light. Maybe there's a bounce light reflecting from an object below. Any clues? Well, the highlight in the back of the boot, the spark on the sword, and the creature's arm where it overlaps the boulder are not quite at the right angle for either direct or bounce light. It's a bit of a stretch, but these lighting choices do not distract the viewer, rather it enhances the composition by bringing your attention to the action. Let's talk about his compositions. Where is the horizon line? From what perspective is the viewer looking at the scene? From above, below, at eye level? I'd say the viewer is slightly below eye level and right in the battlefield. How's the composition structured? How is the space divided? How's the main subject framed in the picture plane? Is it done mostly with values or with other elements? Alcala uses a combination of structure and contrast. He says for comic book panels, he uses an OXT or N structure, and this also applies to each scene. He limits the range of values he uses for rendering. Alcala admitted to using only 5 values, including black and white. He prefers to use contrast to frame the main subject or the action. Master Alcala says, the composition is always the structure or skeleton beneath the rendering. Well, this naturally leads us to what's next. Observations on techniques and tools. Technique is the detail design, and it could include line weights, stroke direction, textures, and the space in between the hatches. What technique was used to build values? Does the master use mostly lines, crosshatches, or unique textures? It's at this point in the process that you want to pay attention to your learning goals. Are there any effects you want to emulate in your work? Or any new techniques you'd like to try? These questions make it easier to make your selection of the most relevant images to get the results you want. What do we know about the master's tools? If this information is not available, you can take a guess. In the book, Alcala shared that he used quills, brushes, and his homemade brush pen. What else? What else do you want to learn from this master? And this is where you could include some of the more advanced fundamentals, such as visual storytelling, linear and atmospheric perspective. Maybe you're really interested in how he does gestures, the anatomy and proportions, and so on. Now that you've made your selection of the images and you have a better idea of what you can learn specifically from this master, you are now ready to start the subject studies. This next step helps further understand how the master made decisions through imitation. A big scene like this is overwhelming, therefore I do mini studies by copying portions of the image for my practice session. I first rough sketch the main character to get a feel for the proportions. Then I redraw it in my Moleskine sketchbook. For the ink application, the tool is a barrier for me because I rarely render with a brush. It's not my favorite. So I have 3 objectives for these studies, which are to gain better control of the brush, render using only 5 values, and making sure I put the contrasts in the right spots for the composition. For advice on brushwork, I turned to Marvel's Ryan Benjamin. In this video, he goes through a warm-up sequence.
Entire thing like this, thick, thin.
And Ryan says it's critical to get confident with what the tools can do. In my warm-up, I also did some thick to thin using both pushing and pulling motions and paid attention to which was my preference. I also rehearsed some of the textures for additional practice before inking my sketchbook study. To get the full benefit of each master study, reflect and take notes. What were the top things you learned as a result of going through the observation process? Those questions we went through. You probably noticed even more things by doing the sketchbook study. Did anything surprise you? Was there an outcome you didn't expect? These are important questions because they tell you more about your preferences and what will help you grow as an artist. Pay attention to this so that you can either apply the learnings in your next project or decide you didn't like the outcomes enough to practice it any further. Here's what I mean. I was surprised by Alcala's use of so few values in this composition. My preference is to use a broader range, and so I'll pass on that. I was inspired by his control of the instruments, and I will for sure continue to practice rendering with brushes, but I wouldn't have known unless I had tried. Another step I often take after this is to immediately render an original piece in the style I just practiced. For example, here with this Harry Clark piece from Sketchbook to final artwork. This helps further commit your observations to memory. Date your work. You can repeat the process with the same master later in your journey to see if you observe or interpret things differently.
I hope this video gave you fresh ideas on developing your observation skills to get the desired results with your pen and ink projects. You'll find the mentioned resources and tools listed in the description below. Thanks for watching, subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.